I'm as an officer, when I was in that capacity, I understood that while I was out there doing what I did, I needed to have someone who understood what I was facing out there and someone who would back me up, someone who had my back. And oftentimes, supervisors, your managers, your directors, those are the folks who are really taking a lot of heat from folks from all over, from the residents, from the elected officials, from the mayors, from everyone. So when it's often perceived that the managers and the supervisors are not the ones that are actually out there doing the job, and because they're not doing it, they're the ones that have a lot of free time. Oftentimes, their time and their energy is devoted to making sure that you have what you need in order to make it happen. I know that when I was in the on the field doing it, and I know that when I managed teams, smaller teams to larger teams, it's so important for it was important for me to spend my time ensuring that all the needs were met. Now, Mitch, I know that you have a team out there in Colorado, and what do you find yourself doing most of the time when they think you're doing nothing? Tell us what that looks like to you.
So in two words, the easiest way to explain it is brand management. And that's a business term. People think, oh, marketing, that kind of stuff. And it really is building collaborations amongst elected officials, the city administration, city organizations, private nonprofits, any group that you can think of that's involved in your community. There's a good chance your director or your manager is interacting with them on a daily basis or weekly basis at least. Here in Colorado, we have one of the news stations has a call for action program. And so I expect at least once a week to get a call from a volunteer who's either doesn't know where to turn. They have a caller who's saying, I was wronged by this contractor, or the city's doing this, or some unique situation that they don't know. Who do we talk to? And so because code enforcement and directors and managers deal with every department in the city traditionally and lots of other agencies, we typically know here's who you need to call. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of public relations that goes into being a manager and a director, because the last thing you want is the media to come attack you for something that one of your staff did, only hearing the resident's side and then rolling with that. If your manager or director is effective at managing the brand, any organization, whether it's an elected official and the city administration or anyone else, will reach out to the director or manager to get our side of the story. And that effectively is the job of the manager or the director. I can tell you the other thing that I do at least 15 times a day is I write. Whether it's an email, whether it's a response, whether it's a proposal, whether it's paragraphs or promotional material. If you're looking to move up into the supervisor or director manager, you got to be a good writer. It's just that simple, because so much of what we do these days it's not one-on-one, pick up the phone call, talk to somebody. It's emails, it's text messages, and you have to be quick, you have to be succinct, and you have to make sure that the message you're writing is the message that you want delivered. Kelvin and Crystal, you have comments on that since you're also in the manager role?
Crystal?
And I'll add this to it, Crystal. How about the unapproachable manager? We had a comment in the chat that sometimes all managers are unapproachable. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, so let's be a little, let me be the devil's advocate here. What happens when, you don't have a manager that's so great? What happens when, or maybe they are great, but we just don't see eye to eye with our manager, or maybe, we just have personality conflict, or, because ultimately managers are people too, right? And I think there's a misconception a lot of the time that the manager, we all need somebody to blame. I mean, the reality is that the manager is always the bad guy. When the news has to be delivered, if a change has to be made, someone's hired we don't like, someone got the job that we don't like, whatever it is that we don't like, we have to have someone to blame. And typically, who else to blame but the manager, A. And then B, in all reality, there are circumstances where we just don't get along with leadership. You know, sometimes we just see things differently. And if you're someone that, you know, feels that way, kind of like what they say about politicians, if you don't like it, let's get you in some training so we can get you to become a manager. Let's get you in position to do what you feel like needs to be done so that you have a department and you're in a position to be able to, you know, incorporate your thoughts, your views, your ideas, and manage and run and lead a department into success. And so, you know, I think that, I mean, there's so many perspectives. Management is hard. If I'm honest with you guys, it is, and I think everyone on this call that's, you know, that's all five of us could agree. And any other manager or leader that's on the call will agree. Management is tough. It's hard work. It's a constant learning game. You're expected to always know the answer. You're expected to always be on, right? What happens when you have a bad day or your spouse upsets you or your kids, I don't know, waste coffee in your car, whatever it is, right? Like managers are always expected to be on, and very, very few, you know, little of the time do we have any grace or any patience for our managers. So, you know, it's you know, it's kind of glass half empty and half full, right? And I just, you know, I think that that's just some additional perspective for me. And I see, I'm going to pass it over to you, Mitch. I just wanted to just add a couple quick things to your thoughts earlier, though, regarding, you know, this subject and your thoughts, Marcus. I'm kind of one for, you know, just kind of giving some specifics, right? And what do managers do and framing that a little bit more, maybe for someone that is not a manager and that's really interested in doing that line of work, specifically in our industry. I just want to, you know, kind of give some, you know, a couple of details in terms of perspective. What it looks like is, you know, communication and collaboration. It looks like developing a team. It looks like planning and strategizing. It looks like problem solving, decision making, managing performance, you know, project management, delegation, managing up. If you've never heard the term, it's talking to your superiors and getting them to see things, you know, managing up, getting them to see things that they don't see that will benefit your department or your organization or your community. It's conflict resolution. It's just a constant work towards the development of the overall division, department, or organization that you're serving. And so that Kelvin, Mitch, please feel free.
Yeah, you know, Crystal brings up a great point about managing up. The five moderators on this panel have all, you know, years of experience in code enforcement, and that's certainly helpful as a manager to know what it was like to work cases and respond to angry people, that kind of stuff. If you don't have a manager that came from the field and worked up, invite them on a ride along. If they don't have the time, tell them, hey, can I have 15 minutes? I want to tell you about this difficult case I'm working. And maybe they're going to say no. Maybe they're not interested. But, you know, keep hammering at them. And if you get 5 minutes, if you get 2 minutes, you know, managing up is a great tool. If you've never done it, it's hard to do in the beginning, but it's just more about giving grace to the guy who thinks he knows everything or the gal that thinks they know everything, and teaching them what they need to know. Kelvin, you have some thoughts?
Well, yes, but you know, and I had a thought, and Stephanie Peavy just went to the chat and messed my whole thought up, but I'm going to talk about that for a second, because there is a level of expectations from employees to managers that managers need to be as transparent as possible and give as much information as possible to their employees so they can feel engaged in what's going on. Now, there's you know, we're culpable for what we tell them, so there's only so much we can tell employees. But when you're a manager or you're an employee and you feel like your manager is not approachable, or you feel like your manager is not communicating enough, then there comes a time in your career that you're going to have to say something, because what happens is conflicts create and they grow. And so right now they're unapproachable. And then if they're not unapproachable, then that festers, and then employees start talking to employee and to employee to employee. And now we've got this little brouhaha brewing, and instead of getting in front of it, now we're reacting to it. And we all know what it's like in code enforcement when we're reactive instead of being proactive. And so no matter what people may say, I think the proactive approach is the best way to deal with, with a manager who you feel is unapproachable, because maybe they don't realize it. Maybe they're an introvert, or they just got a look about them that makes them unapproachable. But you have to make that, you have to discern that, whether it's their personality or are they really that way. And that's just my 2 cents on that.
And I would add that, if you're making reasonable choices, you're doing your best in the role that you have, and you're looking for opportunities to grow within the organization, managers are going to look differently on you rather than the person who's just always, complaining because they didn't get the newest vehicle, or they didn't, they didn't get the shift they wanted, or whatever, whatever other thing that is the thorn in their side. If you have a positive attitude and you're looking to grow and you keep it positive, that really impacts the manager's perception of your attitude and demeanor.
I
Yeah.
agree. And I wanted to, I was just kind of considering, what does this look like in terms of like actionable steps, right? And when you think about, the typical engagement between, someone that, an employee and a manager that maybe, a little tough and challenging sometimes, what is our approach, right? Is there an issue, right? Maybe the manager didn't address the issue the way we needed them to, or we wanted them to, but how do we present issues? Do we come to the situation or to the manager with the situation and expect the manager to always have the solution? Or have we done any, research ourselves to kind of come with something that might be a solution to the issue, right? So, hey, Madam, Miss Manager, whatever it is, I don't know. I was in the field today, and the bags we use to post our notices, aren't big enough. I don't know. And I've got to keep folding them, and it's taking more time at my inspections and blah, blah, blah. Maybe do a little research, right? Go on Amazon, figure out what would work for you. What is a solution to the issue, and maybe present that, right, as an option, and see where your manager goes from there. That's, obviously just pulling something out of the bag, but the bigger picture is, just be solution oriented, come with solutions when you have challenges, and, try to work with the manager regardless of what the relationship looks like.
I agree. And just in closing on that, Crystal, on that note, communication, right? Establishing effective communication. How do you communicate versus how do you supervisor communicate? Sometimes things will get lost in translation, right? We talked about diversity. We're dealing with different generations. Different generations communicate differently. Maybe your manager needs you to walk into the office and have a conversation with her versus sending a text message. So establishing that criteria, and like you said, being solutions oriented, understanding communication and understanding each other's role goes a long way in making this happen.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts and expounding on that. I took from that, I wrote down brand management, representing ourselves, our jurisdiction, our elected officials is our mission for our positions. We are all managers at some level. I think, that's important to think about. Everybody is a manager. You are managing what your role is in your jurisdiction, and taking that responsibility to know as much as you can, train as much as you can, get educated, and doing that and providing that service to your jurisdiction. It's important that from the lower levels of management that we train and prepare ourselves. So, I think everybody's probably worked for a difficult supervisor or manager at some point in their career. But ultimately, I think what cities are challenged with across this country, our jurisdictions are challenged with, is building people from the bottom to the top. And so if that's something your jurisdiction does well, congratulations. But if not, you still have a chance to do that, taking classes on your own, getting educated, getting degrees at higher levels if you think that is something that you need. And then finally, I think I took out of that, solutions and not just problems, and not coming to a supervisor or manager or director, whoever that may be, with a frustration and a complaint. That's okay, as long as it's done with respect and a communication style that fosters further conversation. But have those solutions ready and able to be given to the people that you're talking to. All right. Great job on that. We're going to move forward to our final discussion topic, which is design thinking, a creative approach to solving code-related problems. And we're going to start out with Mr. Kelvin Bean on this subject.
Excuse me, Greg.
Design thinking, a creative approach to solving code-related problems.
Listen, when we're talking about designing safety for code-related problems, it is a imperative that we look at the whole perspective of what we're doing, what encompasses code enforcement. Okay, we look at the demographics, we look at the employees that we have, we look at the needs of a community, and from that we have to formulate a plan of some sort to best serve the community. And the question is, how do we best serve the community? Well, I attend a lot of neighborhood meetings. What's the purpose of going to neighborhood meetings? Getting to understand what the priorities are for those communities. It's interesting because at one point I had an employee at a jurisdiction that I worked at, and he was deemed a problem employee. And when I inherited this employee, I had to understand what the issue was. Come to find out that the issue that he was having was that he was not addressing the needs of the community. Everyone has worked in different communities. They've worked in places where you have the economically depressed areas, and then you have the areas that, are from money. Can you relate to that? Right? So their experiences are very vastly different than people who live in lower economic areas. So what I did was went to the community meeting, found out what was most important to them. Then I designed a strategy to address what was more important to them. And the truth of the matter is, in the high-end areas that we work, it was a matter of, these certain criteria of these people, they were concerned about trash carts. Now, in most jurisdictions, trash carts aren't the prevailing issue for code enforcement. That's really a low-level priority for many. But in this certain community, the strategy was designed to say, hey, you know what? I'll say, if that's what's most important to them, then let's address that issue with them. So yes, trash carts, Cynthia. And so everybody has a level of priorities that's important to them, right? So what this employee did, he concentrated on the actual needs of the community, and they thought this gentleman was the best code officer since Marcus Kellum and Greg Smith. It was just really fascinating that they wanted to give this guy a street name but it was just a matter of meeting the needs of the constituency. When we talk about designing strategies, when you talk about that, there's various needs for various different communities. I know that, Greg, that currently in your role that you're sitting in now, I know that we all get calls, managers get calls, and we get selective enforcement actions in certain areas. And share with me, Greg, how you go about implementing those strategies.
So, I have a very unique demographic setup in my jurisdiction where the city is really split in two different sides, one being kind of middle to upper class and one being middle to lower class, each having individual needs and individual wants and desires. So I have come up with a prioritization system for our complaints and our citizen concerns. We have limited staff. I'm sure everybody out there, I'm sure you all have enough staff to do everything you need, but we are challenged with that. And then we have rental inspections, we have complete inspections, all those things. So I just wrote in my little notes here that prioritization of those complaints and those concerns is a big thing. And being transparent with your community on the realistic way things are going to work is very important, because you will get those people who want to complain and want an immediate action on that complaint, and then expect follow-up and expect, all these things to be coming to them. And my reality is we don't have that time. We don't have that time to immediately follow up with the citizen. We may not even have that time to immediately follow up and investigate a complaint. So prioritization and having that kind of step, 1, 2, 3, here's what we focus on, and then being transparent with your community on what that actually is and how that's going to work. I think that goes a long way. I see Marcus, you have your hand up if you want to go ahead and add on that.
Sure. Yeah. I think that is exactly what design thinking is, right? When we talk about trying to solve these code related problems with a creative approach, it's a combination of what everybody said, right? It's the guy with the carts, for instance, Kelvin. A part of design thinking has to do with understanding the desirability of the problem, right? What makes sense to the people and for the people. But in order to design this being creative in solving the problem, you have to know what the problem is, right? So the desirability, what makes sense to the people, and then it's about feasibility, right? What can we do in order to make it happen? Is it even feasible to accomplish the goal that was set by the person? And this is the complainant and the violator, right? Can we match those expectations? And then the last part of that design thinking has to do with viability, right? Is it likely that we can maintain whatever the change is? Is it sustainable, right? Are the solutions that we're coming up with sustainable? Is the information enough to the person that they will understand that I now have to maintain my lawn versus going every week and telling them they have to cut their grass? So I think design thinking, when we think about that and we talk about solving using creative approaches, it really is just trying to understand what the need is and coming up with a viable solution that could last throughout the process, right? A lot of times we look for the quick fix, and the quick fix don't always work. We have to put some thought into what can we do to make it sustainable. What do you think, Crystal?
Well, you know what? I'm actually going to let Mitch go first because his hand was raised before me.
So, what Marcus said really struck a chord with me. And I think the key when we think about design thinking, what we really need to focus on is the thinking word. And we know what resources we have as code enforcement officers in our jurisdictions to solve problems. But if we go out to a property and we're listening to somebody, the key is to listen to what they are saying and not just say, okay, I've got to have a conversation, then I'm going to offer X or Y or Z, or I'm just going to immediately write a ticket. We all have those belligerent, combative people that we deal with. And yes, maybe the answer in that one is we don't need to think. We just need to write them another ticket. They've been in court before, they're going to be in court again. That's the process we follow. But it's those conversations with people that we have not interacted with either ever or in a long time. People often face or are going through challenging situations that if we listen closely to what they say, we can figure out a solution that's better than just a ticket or our standard process or procedure. Would you agree, Crystal, or you want to tack onto that?
Yeah, no, I think everyone, I mean, I actually had I wanted to challenge the perspective a little bit and actually even tie in, some of our previous conversations with respect to, management and inclusion and, how do we take the challenges and brainstorm amongst our, collaborate amongst our teams, right? Like what happens when there are situations that arise internally, not, maybe it's not an issue out in the field. Maybe there's an internal challenge with the process, or maybe there's an internal challenge with your budget, right? Greg mentioned, staff shortages, right? Like, how do we creatively fill those gaps? How do we adjust, right? I think there's some amazing agencies across the nation that I have seen do some extremely creative stuff. I personally, I kind of want to highlight Cape Coral. I know Todd is on the call, and it's not because I know, Todd personally, but Cape Coral has been a very, very top-notch agency that does extremely amazing creative thinking with respect to issues externally, internally, right? And so when you don't have the support, maybe of leadership, right? Maybe you don't have the resources and the funding. How do you sustain then? How do you pivot, right? Like, what does that look like? Has anyone seen a circumstance where maybe, I don't know, their census came back and they've got, I don't know, 10,000 more people than they did the year prior, and they're still working with the same one code enforcement officer or two. What do you do to make those adjustments? How do you include your team in that process to be able to come up with creative solutions to make the job a lot more sustainable?
You know, and I do want to add this because this is really important to me coming from a management perspective. You know, just because you're a manager doesn't mean that you always have to come up with the idea. And it doesn't mean that your employees don't have a valuable input into what's important. There have been many, many times where I've gotten a call from administration and they wanted us to do X, Y, and Z. And I know how I would do it, right? But oftentimes, you know, my design strategy would be, we need to do a sweep here. I'll be back in an hour, come up with a plan. Automatically, my code officer would get their motors running, and they would come up with a strategy, a design for that plan. And if it's anything remotely close to what I would like to do, I go with it. Because it's not, if we want to grow employees, we want to birth leaders, we want to birth code officers who are exceptional, we have to give them the room to grow. And design strategy is one way to get them to grow, because if you give them the opportunity to show their worth and show their value, they'll be appreciated. They'll be more invested in what we're doing, and then you'll be ushering in the new wave of code enforcement managers and leaders.
It has to be a part of the culture too. It has, because some folks are working in environments that really don't embrace initiative, innovation, and these kinds of strategies. So it really does take the culture. It has to be a culture shift as well, you know, and I talk a lot about that. We have to usher in the culture. Frontline folks, you have the energy, you have the knowledge base to be the one to start the change, the culture.
Great.
So I'd like to add, that's perfectly, you know, framed right there. And I'd like to add in that culture, something I've kind of challenged myself to do in learning how other jurisdictions do things and how they're successful is starting at the elected official level, and in making sure that your value is seen and known by your elected officials, the council people, the board members, your mayor, your CAO, or however you're structured. You'd unfortunately be surprised how many of those people sit on those positions and don't really have an idea of what we do. And so the design should be from the time you have new people come on your council, your board, or a new mayor, taking that time at either at the management supervisor or the frontline employee, if that's possible, to have those conversations with those people, because those are the people that decide the money and where it goes and decide the need for the community. And we've all heard that, you know, code enforcement isn't always looked at as a priority in a jurisdiction. And I'm here to tell you, the folks, that we are and should be one of the most important things in every jurisdiction. You know, I'm in a jurisdiction that's well over 130 years old, with housing that's on average over 100 years old, and structures that are that old. If we didn't have a maintenance ability to enforce via the IPMC or whatever ordinance you may have, imagine what that could turn into and what our sustainability is going to be for the future. So I really encourage that open conversation and education and transparency with your elected officials as a design to support yourself and your jurisdiction in your code enforcement efforts.
So I just want to throw in there, I just happened to look at the chat quickly. Sorry, guys, there's so many messages going through, and you know, we want to get through the dialogue. But I did notice someone said Brana, and I apologize if I'm not saying the name properly, but they say, I created a letter to give out to local business owners to see if they would be interested in volunteering time and services to the residents who need assistance. For example, lawn care, clean up properties, community approach, neighbors helping neighbors. And I think that, so many times, and that just kind of really lends into, creative thinking, right? Like, some of us have got some extremely great ideas. I'll be honest, I'm not the most creative person. And so I encourage, even the thought around bringing back to the bosses and the supervisors, a team of people, maybe a group, a small group, depending on the size of your department, that they're, as an additional role and responsibility, that they work to, address complex issues or, matters that are a little challenging. Maybe they are, the innovators of thought as it relates to to the challenges, and they, kind of spearhead the ideas to bring to, to management. I mean, that even positions you in a lot of cases for promotion, for lead jobs, for senior jobs. When your manager is, don't just do it. I would never encourage you just to do it. Have the conversation first, right? Because we always want to make sure that we're addressing liabilities and we're ensuring that there are no issues as it relates to whatever our idea is. But we also want to be noticed, right? To Greg's point about, making sure that your politicians and the elected officials and your city managers kind of see you and hear you and know you. And to add to that, show up to the meeting when your manager does the proclamation, guys. Like, take the time to be acknowledged, show up. That's the time to be seen, and to highlight if your colleague does something super amazing in the field that's creative, or maybe, you've got a colleague that is creative and maybe they're just not someone that's willing to speak up. Point them out, bring them, acknowledge them so that they have a space and the opportunity to kind of be seen and heard as well. So there's just, there's so much around the idea and the subject matter. And I kind of just wanted to encourage, the fact that, again, just tying this discussion to the last discussion, that managers can't do this job alone. And, it's a team effort. And I think everyone has something valuable to add.
And
Excellent.
Crystal, I would add to that, you don't have to sit there and think about it on your own and try to come up with solutions. There's 226 people on this Zoom meeting right now, and every single person here has great ideas and thoughts. If you're in a small agency that has 3 people, I visited with a guy from Arkansas. They were code enforcement and animal control for the whole city. There was 3 of them. Reach out to other agencies, reach out to people in your area or in your state, or even at the regional or national conferences and these kind of things. There's great value in talking with other people that do what we do.
Absolutely. There's to round that out and to get to the question portion, our previous jurisdiction I had a mission of own it, solve it, and take pride. And that touches every single level and every single position. If you just think about that for yourself, I need to own the problem, I need to solve the problem, and I need to take pride in my role in doing that. I think you'll be very beneficial from following that mantra. Okay, so we are going to answer a few questions. We've got about a little less than 15 minutes here. So I'm going to read off one of the questions. Thank you for all the questions, by the way. We had numerous questions submitted via the registration. Thank you so much for that. The participation in the chat has been fire. You guys are just on it. I wish we had all day and all night to answer all these questions, but rest assured, this is not the last you're going to see of all of us. We really are here to serve you. This is something we came up with to be able to do that. So don't worry, we still will have some other venues and some other ways to attend to your questions. So the question I picked off the list here, how can one be a more effective inspector? I'll go ahead and let Marcus start out with that one.
I love the freestyle nature of this. And just so everybody knows, Greg randomly picked one and randomly picked us. And this is what we do. How can one be a more effective inspector? I think the very first thing that we need to do if we want to be a more effective inspector is decide that we want to be an effective inspector, right? Because the moment you realize that that you're doing something because you want to do it, not because you have to do it, it changes your perspective, right? The Strategizing, we've talked about creative design and implementation. But the bottom line is, if you want to be more effective at what you do, the one step is to find the people that are doing really, really cool things across the country. We have a bunch of folks on this call right now. Find the people that are doing really cool things and start to see what they're doing, right? Because it's very possible that you can use that, tweak it in a way that makes sense for you. Further your education, take these classes, take other classes, uh, expand your mindset, right? And try to understand the pulse of your community, because sometimes you can't be the inspector you want to be where you are. Love what you do, but don't particularly love where you do it, because they might not love you back, right? So the first step is make that decision that you do want to be incredible, and then start the process.
You know, I like to
Excellent.
add, I like to add something, Marcus, because you struck a chord with me with that, because there are many of you who are working in code enforcement right now who are handcuffed with what they let you do, what they allow you to do, and that can become extremely frustrating. But don't let that frustration turn you into something that you're not. Find the opportunity to expand your horizons and then move on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind adding being receptive to feedback and reflection. I think it's really important that we all recognize that every day we're growing and we're learning, and we're adding, new things into our toolbox, even if we are a vet at this thing, 20 years in a game, 25 years in a game, things are changing every day. And so it's critical that, we embrace feedback, and that we, take the time to kind of, reflect on our own, intentional advancements or deposits into self as it relates to the profession, and even ourselves as just a professional in general. And, in addition to what the things that Marcus and Kelvin said.
Yeah, I think there was a great share just now by Teresa. Brings up the point of, supporting ourselves with data. Becoming a good officer is following all those procedures, entering all those little annoying clicks and boxes and all those things, because all that stuff matters. And having those key performance indicators representing those two, again, your elected officials or your public or both, that's how we justify what we do. And that's, I think another thing that's been a little bit of a loss in a lot of code enforcement jurisdictions is, hey, catalog all you do every single day. So you show your need, you show that you need to grow. For example, we do rental inspections in my jurisdiction. We didn't traditionally see how many units are we adding every year, and how many big buildings are we adding every year, and are we adding staff behind those numbers to do that? So great stuff. Again, I think everything we've said today emulates how you can become a better inspector. It is your responsibility. Take ownership of it and go to classes, get educated, work with professionals from across the country. Mitch, you mentioned the American Association of Code Enforcement Conference is coming up in a little over a month now in Orlando. Try to get to those things. And honestly, folks, I know that lots of times there's not funding for that within your jurisdiction. And I'm telling you, if you paid for it on your own, it would be worth every single penny of your own money. It is very, very valuable. It is a great experience. You will gain so much knowledge, and you'll gain good friends from doing it. All right, next question. I'm just going to broadly, we have a lot of safety questions, and honestly, it's too big of a subject to answer in the limited time we have. There are resources. There's the Code Enforcement Officer Safety Foundation. There's the American Association of Code Enforcement. Look to your local or state association if you have one. We partner, I've used all those resources, but again, safety is your priority for yourself. You need to take those steps to learn for yourself what those are as well. Hopefully your jurisdiction will help you do that, but reach out to professional trainers, to professional organizations, to state associations, and the like. Let me go to the next one. I think we already asked what creative approaches do we have We have some very interesting ones. We don't have to answer this one, but what about hot dog vendors was one of our questions. So that's a very entertaining question that we might get into someday. Is one, who trains management and directors? Sometimes they don't know what the code is, and we kind of answered that in here, but let's talk on that side of it. Let's talk about the responsibility of training for the managers, for the directors and the supervisors.
If I may, right up my alley here. I had a conversation with our mayor back in 2020 about management and leadership training, because what typically happens is they hire the best employee to be the next supervisor or the next manager, and they don't give them the management skills to lead people. And so my mayor had the foresight to move me into that position, but it's a cultural thing, because a lot of people who sit in seats of power think they know it all, right? They think they got it all figured out and that you can't tell them anything. But I learned from a wise man one time. He said, if you're the smartest person in the room, that you're making a mistake. They have to be, the powers that be have to get the messaging across that our managers and our leaders need to be emotionally intelligent, have some level of skill in the areas that they have to be leading over, and they have to be willing to be a vessel for content and information and training. And once you usher them into that space of training, that's when that takes place. But it really starts up top, and you have to get that messaging through.
Kelvin, let me interject though. Also, I will tell you, I've been a manager now in Colorado for 7 years, and yeah, they can train me on budget stuff. They can train me on the policies and the procedures, but really who trained me to become the manager I am is every one of the staff on my team. And when they disagree with the question, with a directive or something, respectfully say, hey, I disagree with your decision. Can we talk about it? Occasionally I'll say no. That's the decision. We have to go with that. Other times I'll say, let's sit down. Tell me what you're thinking. And the biggest area of growth I've experienced over the last 7 years is from staff who come respectfully and openly to discuss whatever's going on. And I realize that maybe you don't feel comfortable doing that, or maybe a manager's not going to respond positively to that. And if that's not the case, it falls into that managing upward situation. But really for me, that's who has taught me the most. And I can tell you, there's been a couple of supervisors where we go round and round and we're yelling and screaming and pounding on the table. But at the end of the day, I realize they're doing it for my benefit. And those conversations have made us a stronger team. And they're still here. They're still successful.
And if I can add to that, frankly, there are, a plethora of universities, online schools, trainers that will teach you, even, executive coaches that will help you with certain things. But the reality is, to Mitch's point, really, the adversity that you encounter as a manager is really your best teacher. Trial and error, you're gonna mess up. There is not a book out there that can teach you independently. There's strategy, there's tactics, there's principles, right? But you really, really learn from scraping your knees. And if you are, at any level of management, you really understand and learn that, because really to be a manager, we're talking about management here, not necessarily leadership, but the managing of people is such an intricate space, right? And really not until you're in it and you start to really, because what shows up for you when you're dealing with people and the challenges is who you are, right? And what makes you tick and what makes you frustrated and impatient and all of those various things. But a couple of resources that I would, offer up for consideration is there are a lot of great podcasts on, strategies and tools on how to be a better manager, just things that you can put into your toolkit. So I encourage you, to go out there and, take a listen to some of those podcasts. There's some people that are really dropping some real good gems on how to do that kind of thing. And, don't be afraid to, if you go to a conference or you're on a roundtable chat like this and someone resonates with you, or you feel compelled to want to talk to them a little more, ask them to mentor you, ask them, can I give you a call from time to time when I've got a question, right? Don't be afraid to say, this just came up and I don't have a clue what to do. The best managers are the ones that are not afraid to say, I don't know what to do.
Excellent point. I think we're coming up to time here, so I'll wrap up that. I think all the questions and a lot of our focus is going to be on taking that personal responsibility to get what you want or need and taking the effort to find it. That goes a long way. I think if we rely on our jurisdiction, our supervisors, whoever that may be, for them to give it to us, it's not always going to come. So take the effort and the responsibility to increase yourself and your knowledge and your professionalism. Well, we are at time, folks. We have had an absolutely great time. Like Marcus said, we love kind of this looser format, but a little structure in there to have some fun with it. The questions and the interaction in the chat has been absolutely amazing. Thank you all for that. We will provide a few things, follow up. We will email you a copy of the recording here. Unfortunately, it stopped recording and I had to restart it. Basically, it's a second discussion question, but you'll get most of it in there. We're going to send you a survey and we will plan the next session and we'll see if we can have that ready for you. But if not, please look out on our social media. Thank you for Crystal Patterson being here with Hearst Consulting, Mitch with that code enforcement guy, Marcus, Metric One, and Kelvin B, code performance consultant. All my friends, all my family, I love you all. Thank you so much for your contribution today. Everybody here, this is, again, another step in your career and your professionalism. You're taking the effort, you're taking the time. Thank you for being here. We're going to hang out a little bit after I stop recording here. We'll try to answer a few questions before we completely get out of here. But thank you so much. Be safe out there. Thank you for everything you're doing in your community to make it safe and sustainable. And have a great day.